Hi, hopefully this works. This is Gabriel Thompson, and I have a few of the questions that Jennifer sent to me. I think I've selected 6 or 7. And first, very excited that you guys read Working in the Shadows or parts of it. The first question I was going to answer was what motivated me to write the book. And I think one of the main motivations for me was just a sense of curiosity. I had spent a number of years organizing with immigrants and writing about immigrants, and yet had no real sense of what it would be like to do the kind of jobs that I ended up doing and writing about. And so much of it was just curiosity. What is it like to walk into a massive poultry plant and work 8 or 9 hours in a row, dismembering thousands, tens of thousands of chickens? What does that do to your mind? What does it do to your hands? Who you hang out with? What are your relations like with supervisors? There were just so many questions that I had that I was really interested to learn more about. And so I think part of it was curiosity. The other part was just this sense that so much of the immigration debate, and so much about the debate on many issues, takes place very far removed from where the issues are playing out on the ground. And I felt like, especially with immigration, there is so much noise made in air-conditioned TV studios in New York City or politicians in D.C. Around the issue of immigration, and not enough time actually asking some basic questions like, what is the work that many immigrants do? What do they think about it? How is it playing out in the real world? So that was trying to sort of introduce this reality that's often hidden to a broader public. Who made the most of an impact on you throughout your journey writing this book? I think for me, one of the surprising things was that what really impacted me were the U.S.-born residents I got to know in rural Alabama at the poultry plant. Because I think I'd spent a lot of time writing about poverty and working with people that were pretty hard up and had to stress over a lot of things that I took for granted growing up. Not having enough food, being evicted from housing. But I was really struck by the level of sort of depression that U.S.-born residents in Alabama were dealing with. Just the lack of opportunities, the lack of people bouncing back and forth between the poultry plant and Walmart. A sense that we were all doing the same work at the poultry plant. You had whites and you had blacks and you had immigrants, but that for the whites and the blacks that were born in the U.S., they were doing work and kind of stuck in the same place that their parents were. They didn't see much of a path forward for them. Whereas, for example, Guatemalan immigrants had come from Guatemala, often fled a civil war, worked in the tomato fields in Florida, and now were working year-round in the poultry plant while their kids were going to school and speaking English, were U.S. citizens, and they only had gone to like 5th or 6th grade. So they had this sort of upward trajectory. And I was struck by the ways in which how you think about where you're at influences how you feel. And so I think my time in rural Alabama was, and people like Jeff, or I think I named him Kyle in the book, who gave me rides to the plant and who drove his car into a ditch because he was so tired. That really had an impact on me. And another question is, have you kept in contact with anyone you worked with? And I have. I actually went back to Yuma when the book came out, and Yuma has one Barnes & Noble, and I had a book event there, and a bunch of the farm workers that were on my crew in the book, I got in touch with them and invited them to come, and so they actually showed up at the event, and it was by far my favorite book event. Yuma has a bunch of older people like snowbirds, so there's maybe like 100 people, many of them sort of older folks that were in Yuma for the winter. And then it was myself and this whole crew of farm workers. So I just kind of sat back and the farm workers really fielded the questions and talked about their work. And that was a great experience for me, because I think in writing the book you hope that you're somehow making an impact or raising consciousness or changing the way perhaps people think about their lettuce or their food or where it's coming from. But it's an act of faith in many ways. But here it was kind of tangible, like here were the farm workers that are bringing your lettuce. Here are the people that are eating the lettuce, sort of interacting. And it was great because there was also a number of standing ovations for the farm workers about just an appreciation, I suppose, for how much work they put in their jobs. This question's a tricky one. It's wouldn't improving the work environment and wages cause production costs to rise, which would cause inflated prices? Well, a couple of things. First, the way a lot of these industries work, you can for agriculture, I know professors have studied this and found that you can actually have a pretty sizable 25, 35, 40% wage increase for your farm worker and have it only very smally impact like a family's yearly budget for food. The reason is that there's such a high volume of, so if you're cutting 3,000 heads of lettuce a day, that worker is being incredibly productive. If you bump their wages from $8 to $10 an hour, the amount that you're going to see increase on like a head of lettuce or for a year's worth of lettuce buying from a family is going to be very modest. Same with chicken, even more so with chicken, because chicken, the amount of work that each person is doing is so high. The problem is that if one chicken company, and sorry, there's I don't know if there's some huge truck going by. If one chicken company, let's say Pilgrim's Pride, says, you know what, we think our workers, we're super generous, we think they deserve $11 an hour for basically destroying their hands, and not 8. And so we're going to make a small increase in the cost of our chicken that we sell to places like Walmart or KFC. Well, Walmart or KFC, whoever the purchasers are, is going to say, well, Pilgrim's Pride, you're charging us slightly more. We're going to go to the people, the chicken company next down the line that will save us even more money. And so it's sort of a race to the bottom. The way you're going to see increases in the wages is by sort of transforming industries. And you can't do it by one company at a time. You can't do it by one product at a time. Or it's very difficult. You have to sort of get everyone on board and move it up and say, there are certain things that we think as a purchaser, as McDonald's, and you've seen this with the Immokalee workers in Florida who have been organizing tomato pickers, and have had really success in terms of convincing purchasers of tomatoes to say, you know what, here's a baseline. We believe that the workers should be paid this much, and we're willing to pay our suppliers a little bit more to make sure that at the end of the day the farm workers can take a little bit more home with them. So I think there's a lot of room for the wages to go up and not have a huge impact on food prices. And also I would just say that the inflated prices, the idea that it would cause inflated prices is sort of a loaded word. It's an idea that price that it's at now is the right price and reflects the costs. And sort of a moral judgment. I would say, when you buy a really cheap chicken sandwich, that company is going to be probably polluting the land, polluting the water, could be polluting the air with all the trucks. The workers are going home with hands that are hurt. They're going to the emergency rooms for surgeries. So there are all these costs that you're not seeing when you eat a 99-cent chicken sandwich, that in fact are sort of hidden costs that we all sort of pay into and have to help clean up. Has anything to your knowledge improved since you worked these jobs? Have you revisited any of these places? Like I said, I went to Yuma and met with the workers. In Yuma, it's pretty similar. The wages are still about the same. The flour job is... the last time I was there, I'm in Oakland now, but last time I visited the flour district in New York, a number of people had left when he had some new folks in, but it didn't, judging by the way he was, the manager there was acting, it looked very, very much the same. Same with the restaurant. The poultry plant, soon after the book came out, I got an email from the head of OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Agency, I think. They're the federal arm of the federal government that regulates workplace safety. And he said that he had read the book and that they had inspected the poultry plant in Russellville where I worked and fined the company some, I think, $135,000 for safety violations. And so I've kept in touch with some of the workers of the plant, and it seems like some of the more egregious dangers of the plant have been fixed. On the other hand, there's this, and this is sort of technical, but there's this move by the USDA to increase the line speed in poultry plants, in turkey plants around the country. I wrote about that for The Nation magazine last year. Essentially what they're saying is, we can, and this is debatable too, but these advances in food safety are allowing us to run the lines at much faster speeds. And so we're going to allow the companies to run the lines, this pace at which chickens fly by as you're tearing them in half or cutting their wings off or whatever. We're going to allow them to go by faster. And it's going to be like a $250 million savings, I think, a year to the industry because they can jack up the speeds, which is crazy, the idea that you can jack it up any more than it is. But what no one ever thought about was, or the question apparently was not asked, is, well, what would the effect be on workers? So I think right now there was some outcry about that, but not very much. And right now the USDA is still positioned to push this new rule through, which will dramatically speed up the workplace environment. And to me that spoke to a level of sort of where the food movement has its blind spots. There's so much interest in food now, and where your food comes from, and whether it's organic, and the carbon footprint. But in this debate around this new rules to increase the line speed of chickens, everyone was up in arms about, well, will the chicken be safe? If it's going fast, is it just going to be doused with chemicals, and is it truly a product we want to eat? And almost no one thought, like, well, what about the workers? What would it be like to be to be working even more? What would the impact be? So I think that speaks to the and things are changing in terms of people's interest in food and the food movement, paying more attention to workers. But I think that was an example of one of the movement's blind spots, is it doesn't think enough generally about the workers that are in the industrial food system. And this next question is, how did your historical studies inform the project? And this is from, as you might have guessed, from Jennifer, so I have to answer it. I think whatever the topic is, it makes me want to go back a bit, whether it's the role of agriculture in the United States, the importance of poultry, how poultry got its start, the flour district in New York City, the history of immersion reporting, which is what I was doing, which goes back not just to Barbara Ehrenreich wrote a famous book called Nickel and Dime in 2001, I think, where she took low-wage jobs and wrote about them, waitressing at a Walmart. But it goes back much further to George Orwell. Jack London spent a time on the East End of London working. So I think one of the things for me is it always made me want to go back and try to figure out, contextualize things. Even in Russellville, in Alabama, I found that there was a Russellville Historical Society or something. And so one of the claims, no one, I was curious when this poultry plant arrived, what was it like? Were the companies saying it was going to be a great new day for Russellville? How did locals feel? Did they anticipate that plant would bring in so many immigrants? And so I went to the Historical Society and spent a couple of days looking through archives and reading old newspapers and sort of trying to figure out what sort of promises the plant had made, the company had made to the community. And they made all sorts of promises that it would be a great new day. And so I think that as a journalist, generally, you spend most of your time speaking to sources that are living, writing about something, a story that's has changed recently, or that's happening right now. And for me, whenever I start a new topic or start working on a new topic, my first thought is, let me go see what's been written, what's happened before, how do we get to wherever we are right now? Which it might not always be cited directly in the article, but I think helps me think through the issue more broadly. 2 more questions. Would you ever do this kind of project again, but with other different types of work? Yeah, I did a piece. I have done it occasionally, especially when I think it will add something. So, I don't do it just because it's fun or challenging, but I think in a number of cases it actually allows you to get deeper into a subject. For example, race relations in Russellville, Alabama, between blacks, whites, and Latinos. I could have gone in and, as a journalist, interviewed people and said, how do you feel about immigrants? How do you feel about the whites or blacks or whatever? And I would have gotten a certain kind of answer. But you get a different kind of answer when you just hang out on the break floor and watch the way people interact and listen to people and hang out. And so I think sometimes the access of going undercover can really be helpful. Last year I did a long piece for Mother Jones magazine about the growth of low-wage temp work, like blue-collar jobs that were previously a lot of them were union jobs that have been outsourced or become temp jobs that pay $8 an hour. And so I spent about a month working for a company called Labor Ready, and it was the article was a profile of the industry and of Labor Ready, but also sort of chronicling my month spent working for them. And then what are my current projects? My current book project is a biography of a man named Fred Ross, who was an organizer who died in '92, and who is virtually unknown today, but who's one of the most influential organizers of the 20th century. And he worked with, you might know names like Saul Alinsky or Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta. Ross's main work was in the 40s and 50s, organizing to build the political power of Mexican Americans and Latinos. And out of that work came so many leaders like Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta and the United Farm Workers. And so I'm working on a biography of him, which is a straight history book, which is different, something new for me. And then I'm working on this piece, and this also speaks about the importance of history, it's about young farm workers in the U.S., and I'm specifically focusing on farm workers who harvest tobacco in North Carolina. And I was interested in this because tobacco is a really hard crop to harvest. When I was doing lettuce, some people I talked to had been working in tobacco. And it's especially difficult because it's based in North Carolina. It's a summer crop, so it's extremely hot and humid. And as you're working in the fields, the leaves are often wet, and you ingest, the nicotine is absorbed into your skin and into your blood. And frequently people have what's called green tobacco sickness. Or acute nicotine poisoning, which is basically just their body is absorbs too much nicotine and they have to go to the hospital and they throw up and they're sick. And there was actually for me it was striking because it's legal for kids as young as 12 to work in the tobacco fields. And so I'm writing about how it is that that's legal. And again, this goes back to sort of the history. Well, the history of farm work and the weakened regulations for young people goes back to the 30s and sometimes into the 1910s. And so I'm doing that piece now, and that also has a current day policy piece because there had been a move by the Department of Labor under Obama to actually, excuse me, I'm suddenly like all dry-throated. There had been a move by Obama's Department of Labor to strengthen child labor rules in the fields, and that would have prevented young kids from working in the tobacco fields. And they proposed the rule, and there was this huge outcry among from people from Sarah Palin to the American Farm Bureau about saying it was sort of more evidence of a creeping nanny state, more or less. And the Obama administration pulled the rule and withdrew it. So kids are still allowed to work in tobacco fields. That'll be coming out sometime soon, hopefully. And that exhausts all questions that I was able to take now. Again, thanks to you, Jennifer, and thanks to your students for checking out the book. And if people have any specific questions, comments, criticisms that I didn't get to or that you really are curious about, you can definitely shoot me an email and I'll get back to you. Thanks.